Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar, Best Practices in Development with GitHub. Before we begin, I'd like to cover just a few items regarding this webinar platform. At the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a handful of widgets, mainly the Q&A widget, which you can utilize to submit any questions you have throughout today's webinar session. For viewing purposes, you can also expand your viewing window by clicking on the icon found on the top right corner of the slide viewer. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. And lastly, do take a moment to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar. Thank you. At this time, I'll turn it over to your presenter, Vince.
Good morning all, or good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. And welcome to our webinar on best practices in development with GitHub. That's me. I'm Vince Fabro. I am a principal architect on Insight's national team. And that's what I like to do. I'd rather be hiking or biking right now, but here we are. If you're interested, that picture I think is in Sedona, Arizona, up on Cathedral Rock. And in addition, just so you're aware, have Greg Zimmer connected as well. So if you have any questions, just put them into the chat, and Greg will try to address them there. And if we get enough consensus around certain questions, he'll just jump in and ask those to all of us, and we'll cover them there. And okay, so within digital innovation, a little bit more about me. I am within our digital innovation solution area. You see all four there, so I focus over in this area. And specifically within Insight's digital innovation solution area, I focus on a few things here, specifically DevOps, and that's under our Transform area there. So basically I lead our go-to-market offering for DevOps transformations, trying to help companies become top performers in DevOps. And really a lot of this content that we're going through today relates to all of that. In addition, I do a lot of cloud enablement, and I've helped clients move to the cloud for many years. And I also work within the app dev. I'm a developer at heart, and I do a lot of work on cloud native apps, Kubernetes, things like that. So that's about me. Now, what we're looking to today, we have a packed agenda, lots to cover. I'll try to get this done well within an hour. Wish me luck on that. We'll start off with just a super quick intro to GitHub, because there's a common theme we're going to see in the various sections as we go through. And then we'll focus on the best practices. So sections 2 through 6, starting with what goals are we trying to achieve with these best practices. And then 3, 4, 5 is really the guts of the presentation, managing work, code, and CI/CD pipelines. We'll have a really quick aside on remote work, since we're all in the middle of this pandemic, working from home and trying to figure that out. And then we'll talk about looking forward, specifically with GitHub and Microsoft and all. Okay, so here's that super quick GitHub intro. Again, just addressing a common theme we'll see throughout all the rest of the deck. And that's this right here. So basically, where, not surprisingly, multiple tools. And I don't know if any of you are using GitHub right now. I think poll questions coming up that might ask you those questions. But specifically, we're going to see those used as we go across various slides related to GitHub and GitHub features as we talk through the best practices and as those relate to the best practices. And the other thing I wanted to call out on this slide is, since my slides get past these polls, actually my slides went too far. Come back. All right. Was simply that here with the enterprise SKUs here are the two on the right. So we have GitHub Enterprise and GitHub One, and you can host those two ways, just so you're aware. Most of these will be hosted in the cloud, or all these can be hosted in the cloud. The free and team are only in the cloud. And then with the enterprise SKUs, you also have the option to host those on-prem via enterprise server. Okay, the other interesting tidbit or theme throughout this presentation is Microsoft now owns GitHub. So what happens related to that? And we'll talk about it later on. So that may be a burning question in your mind as we go through the presentation. We will get there in the last section. So let's dive into the best practices, starting with what goals are we trying to achieve here? Okay, just general purpose, high-level goals. Again, related to DevOps and being a good DevOps performer. Obviously, DevOps is a broad topic, but specifically regarding development teams here, we want to deliver features quickly and smoothly with little drama, little extra effort, no surprises. We want to maintain forward progress and minimize rework. If we can do that, we will be able to deliver those features quickly and smoothly. We love developers to maximize our heads down productivity. We've got to get heads down to solve those problems and get that code written. And in the end, if we do all those things, we should be able to delight our customers. And really, if you put all these together, you should have a lot of great work days where you can go home at the end of the day and say, I got a lot done today, I feel good about what I did today, and I made my customers happy. 2 thumbs up, it was a good day. Wouldn't we all love that? Now let me take it a step further, throw out there some stretch goals. So this gets a little more advanced. Now we're talking specifically about CI/CD here. So there's continuous integration, there's continuous delivery, continuous deployment. If you were to Google continuous delivery versus continuous deployment, you'd get a lot of posts that talk about that. So what are they getting at? Well, first, let's define things. So starting with continuous integration. And continuous integration is just your CI pipeline, compiling your code, building packages, and putting those packages out there so they can be deployed when the time comes. So that's not really what we're focusing on this slide. We're focusing on continuous delivery and deployment. So continuous delivery. If you were, again, to search for the difference between continuous delivery and deployment, you would always see a bullet point saying you need to have CD pipelines through all of your environments, especially including production. A lot of the posts related to continuous delivery and deployment will also have a second bullet, which says that in your main branch, anytime you push code to your main branch, that code should be ready to deploy to production right then, immediately, if need be. Okay, so it's a bit of a mindset, and it's also kind of a state of the code in your branches that you should always be able to deploy to production from that mainline branch. Continuous deployment takes that one little step further and just says, okay, if that code's ready to be deployed to production, which if you're doing continuous delivery, it should be, then let's go ahead and deploy it. In fact, we'll deploy it to production every single time you push that code to your main branch. Obviously, that's a lot more advanced than continuous delivery, and there's some things you need to do to prepare to support that kind of mode, but that's actually where a lot of the DevOps top performers are striving. They're all striving to achieve that. So that will be a couple of the main goals we'll be talking about through this whole presentation there. Now, what do you got to do to achieve continuous delivery and even continuous deployment? Some of these will surprise you, some will be obvious. One might surprise you. You need to deliver work in very small batches. Why? And we'll talk about this in each of the sections to come. The idea here is, if you research this and look at top performers, Netflix, companies like that, by delivering work in very small batches, they're able to get a lot done in a single day, pushing small changes through their development workflow, and that has proven to be much more efficient than the alternative, which is to try to deploy a few really big things through to your development workflow. Okay, so working in very small batches turns out to be much more effective and much more efficient and faster than trying to deliver large batches of work. So that becomes really important. Again, we're trying to speed the delivery of value and impress our customers. This is fundamental to achieving that. And we will talk about it more. Next up, trunk-based development. And we're not going to talk a lot about this. We'll talk a little bit about it, but so I'll just hold that thought. Won't discuss it much here, but that's related to branching strategies, things like that. Full CI/CD pipeline with testing, scanning, you know, a mature pipeline. That seems pretty obvious. Low-risk deployments. What do I mean by low-risk deployments? This is important. This is high value for you, whether you're going to full continuous delivery and deployment or not. But this is being able to deploy to production in the middle of the day while your users are hot and heavy using your production environment. Okay, this means no more weekend, late night deployments. This means I can deploy any time of day, whenever I want. It's quick, it's painless, it's low risk, and we do it all the time. We might deploy 5 times a day, and no one really cares about it because we do it all the time. It's easy, and it never fails. We'll talk about this more. And in fact, if you want to go deeper here, we do a whole nother webinar just on that. That's an important topic. Very high ROI investment there. Okay, advanced monitoring. So this is all about that goal we had earlier about not having to rework or not getting blocked. Having bugs in production, having an outage in production, that's a big blocker. That's all hands on deck. Stop what you're working on. Let's fix this. Advanced monitoring is one of the pieces you can do to help improve your production uptime. It's getting into things like proactive monitoring. Perhaps that means monitoring a queue to make sure the queue depth isn't getting too deep, things like that. And then getting notifications about those, learning from those sorts of issues that you see in production, and then even doing some things like some automation to actually correct and prevent those issues once you see these things happening via your monitoring. Again, we're not going to talk much about this today. It's really a different topic, but definitely something you should look into. And finally, continuous improvement is going to be a theme throughout. Continuous improvement is a mindset that you should invest in and you should buy into that says we are always going to look at what pain points we have, try to fix them, make things better, and continuously improve everything related to our, our development workflow. Okay, so that should be a part of something you do every sprint. All right, so into our first section here, starting with managing your work. If you don't do a good job of managing your work, everything else downstream is gonna be in trouble. Some goals here. Want to work with our stakeholders, our customers, ensure we are aligned with them. We know what features they're requesting, what the details of those features are, why those are valuable. It's hugely important to making sure we're delivering value to our customers. Next up, we take all that information from our users, from our stakeholders, and then define work items in our backlog with very high clarity, but with minimal effort. That seems like conflicting statements there. With such high clarity that any developer on our team can pick up that work item and start work on it without having to ask 20 questions. But then how can we achieve that with minimal effort? We'll talk about that. And then we want to make sure we're working on the features that are most important to our users at all times. Now, we can't encourage our users to change their minds and reprioritize all the time. That will cause us to stop and rework some things. So we want to avoid that, but definitely want to make sure we're aligned and working on the most valuable work. Okay, what could possibly go wrong here? Well, in the other sections, I have lots of different things that can go wrong. But in this particular case, I had to tell a story because I've dealt with this with a couple of clients in the past year and a half or so, where they've had the same thing go wrong, which really blew up the whole project. And it was all related to product management. And with these clients, their product management team was in a tough spot. The top management, their senior management, said, we need to get this project done so that we can catch up with our competitors. So we're going to make these major changes to our product. So product management is working with the users and also with senior management, because senior management is so heavily invested in this. And unfortunately, senior management and users aren't on the same page. And product management ends up in a situation where they're getting conflicting information from all the stakeholders, and they're not sure what the team should build. I would not want to be part of that product management team. Unfortunately, senior management at these clients has dictated, look, we got to have this done by such and such a date. And that leaves the dev team there, like you see there, I don't know what to build. And the dev team at a point decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to start building something. I'm not sure if it's exactly what they're looking for, but at least I'll have something. And obviously, this is a train derailed type scenario here. The devs build features, and then they eventually demo them to the users and to senior management. And of course, neither one are happy with what's been built. Everything blows up, timelines are busted, and have to stop and regroup. It's just an awful picture. But this is real world, so we don't want to end up in that scenario, obviously. So obviously, lots can go wrong with work management. But let's get into the details of how to do this right. First off, right there, given the story I just told, we want solid product management team members who know their users, are aligned with the users, have a great relationship with them, know the business, can get us good feature details. So that is hugely important. If you don't have that, you don't know what to build, and you're going to be building the wrong things, and your clients are going to say, that's not what I wanted. So that's hugely important. Next up, backlog grooming and sprint planning are two key sprint cadence events. Now, this relates to grooming your backlog such that when someone pulls in a work item from your backlog, they don't have to ask the 20 questions. So this is that goal related to defining your work with high quality, but with minimal effort. So we want high quality. I contend, this is Vince speaking here, I contend that backlog grooming is the main meeting you should be using to refine your backlog and to make your work items well-defined by asking questions, by including details in there, really detailing out that work such that you achieve the goal where any dev could pick that up and start working on it without getting confused about what the details are. Now, how do you minimize the effort to achieve those well-defined work items? Again, this is Vince speaking. In my opinion, I like to have multiple small backlog grooming sessions each week, 2 to 4, something in that range, maybe for an hour, half hour, whatever works. But I'm not contending these should be full team meetings. Maybe just 1, 2, 3 people who are plugged in, want to get heads down and really try to drive those details. And of course, you mix up with different people meeting at different times throughout the week. That is what has worked for me and teams I've worked with as far as driving a really solid backlog with work items that are well defined. And again, the minimizing the effort comes down to not having the full team involved at every single one of those meetings. Okay, here's that breaking down work into small tasks. That's that whole delivering work in small batches theme. So we do want to break down work into small tasks. What I mean here specifically is you have a work item, And that work item can have multiple tasks within it that, when completed together, deliver the full feature that that work item is talking about. So you want to break down work items into small tasks. What are small tasks then? Breaking work down into small tasks means that you should be able to complete multiple of those tasks in a day. And if a task takes multiple days, then that means probably wasn't broken down into small enough of a chunk. Okay, so that's the kind of the guideline related to small tasks. And then the approach to getting there, you may be a long way away from being able to break your work items down into really small tasks. So take that continuous improvement mentality and apply that here. So take your work items as there are. Maybe you don't currently break them down into tasks. So start there. Maybe the tasks you break them down into really aren't that small and can't be completed, in a matter of hours. So maybe start working towards breaking them down into smaller tasks. You'll eventually get there. Okay. And then, so that's the how, as far as, how to achieve those goals. Now, how do we achieve that with GitHub specifically? Okay, GitHub has project boards to measure work, has GitHub issues. Both are related to defining work and organizing your work. And there's also third-party options with regard to work management. Now, to be totally honest with you, in my personal experience in working with many clients, those who have used GitHub, again, in my experience, have all actually used third-party options. Most recent client used Rally. Used Rally as their work management tool. Prior one before that used Jira. So whatever, that's just project boards and GitHub issues just aren't really as sophisticated as some of the other tooling available out there. But as we'll see later on, there are some huge open source projects that do use project boards and issues, so it does work. Okay, here's that, the SKUs again that I pointed out early on. And across the board, both issues, project boards are available, and third-party options are available across the board as well. And I wanted to do some live demos of these, but just to keep it smooth, I just put pictures into the deck. So here's a picture of the Kubernetes open source project. And we are looking at GitHub issues here. So you can see a list of issues. Now, I would suggest that if any of you are developers out there, chances are you've probably already spent a decent bit of time in GitHub issues. I mean, I've been on Kubernetes specifically myself and submitted issues. So this is a really, really commonly used thing, especially if you use any sort of third-party products, open source products. Lots of them have their repos in GitHub and use issues and project boards. Here is Kubernetes project board. And, as of the date, I don't know. But obviously lots of work in their project boards. You see, the title of, you see the swim lanes, first of all, the vertical columns, and, give it a name, obviously the details behind it. You can see, apply labels to it. There's a pretty interface, and it'll get the job done for you. But again, it's not quite as robust as some of the third-party options available. Okay, that's work management. Let's move on to managing code. Again, I know we're going at a fast pace here because we're covering a lot of territory. So what are our goals here? We want to keep the code flowing. This is really highlighting how critical it is for you to have a solid development workflow that your team knows well and loves it and gets the job done. Again, we want to keep our devs unblocked. We want to keep moving forward. And there's continuous improvement again. This is our main workflow here. You really got to nail your team's development workflow and improve it. Always be looking for those pain points and look for opportunities to improve. What could go wrong? lots of things. So here is our chief developer, really rocket science dude here, but keeps committing directly, keeps pushing changes directly to the main branch. Not good. Over here, we got this guy standing at the front of the pull request queue because this guy submitted a PR that changed like 3,000 lines of code. And so when everyone got the notification saying, hey, there's a pull request to review, they're like, I'm not touching that thing. It's too big. And so it sat there for a few days. And then eventually he complained enough that some people agreed that they would help him with the pull request. And they've been working on that pull request because it's so huge for days. Now they have a big old queue of other devs waiting to get their work PR'd. And these guys are all, the PR process is getting feedback on your code. These guys can't get feedback on their code, which makes them hesitant to move forward and work on something new. Really bad situation. And lo and behold, several of these people here are most likely going to have to merge in changes from either this guy's PR or someone else in front of them in the line. That's a painful process. So that's a bad development workflow when you allow that kind of stuff. Okay, of course, sorts of other things that could go wrong, but just get a sampling there. So, how should we manage our code? Well, there's that development workflow, which is key. It should be well-defined workflow that everyone understands. It shouldn't just be in your heads, though. You should actually document it. Why? So you can onboard new devs easily. Again, well socialized within your team. You should reinforce it whenever someone tries to sidestep. Like that guy who did the huge PR should be getting slapped upside the head from everyone saying, you shouldn't do that. And again, continuous improvement. Your type of workflow is huge for your team. You should always focus on improving it. Okay, a branching strategy that works for your team. We're not going to go deep here. That's a whole presentation in and of itself. However, you should be aware that top DevOps performers tend to use far fewer branches than most of us tend to use. And their branches are very short-lived, day or two max. How can you do that? Well, think about, this goes back to the small batches of work. So if you break your work items down into small tasks, and you create a branch for that small task, and you finish that task in a few hours, that's a pretty darn short-lived branch there. Okay, remember, we want to get multiple tasks done in a day. That means our branches should be really short-lived. Now, there's another way that some teams do that. They might create a branch for their work item and then work on each task on that same branch. So doing multiple PRs from the same branch, so that makes it longer-lived. So you can take whichever approach you want, but short-lived branches definitely rule. Keep your PR small and manageable. So in other words, don't commit 3,000 lines of code. Keep it small, easy to review. Again, no one wanted to touch that guy's code who PR'd 3,000 lines. And on the flip side, be eager to review other people's PRs. So hopefully you have notifications set up so you're notified when a PR is available. When you get done with your task, hop on and start reviewing some PRs. Clear out that queue of PRs so it's always short. You want to tightly manage and stay focused on managing those PRs so everybody is flowing. Everybody's delivering code. And again, these are all three. These three bottom ones are all related to small tasks, small batches of work. Okay, now that branching strategy. So we talked about trunk-based development early on. We talked about how top DevOps performers use smaller or fewer branches. So here that is. So we have on the left Git Flow, very commonly used, and on the right we have GitHub Flow and trunk-based. And you can see just by glancing at it that the trunk-based side, there's fewer lines going through there. So let's look at GitFlow first. You can see it has a develop mainline branch and a master mainline branch. So those are continuous, never-ending branches. And you can see that, feature branches branching off of dev and then eventually pushing code over into the master branch to be deployed. Fine. Most of my clients, frankly, have used that over the years. Many, many clients. And some of them will have more than 2 mainline branches. They might have a test branch and a stage branch, whatever, meets their requirements. But that's a lot of moving code around between branches. Those get complicated and hard to manage. But they work, and lots of people use it. On the right, however, think of it from this perspective. If you are a Netflix or much more advanced development development team, and you're doing continuous deployment, so basically every time you commit code to that branch, you push code to the branch, and it passes through your process and everything, you're going to deploy it. So then, if everything's getting deployed right off this mainline branch, why do you need all the other branches? Okay, so this is what a lot of these DevOps performers who do continuous deployment use. Trunk-based development works for them because in the end, it's simpler if you've already eliminated all the complexity around it by doing low-risk deployments and really good CI/CD pipelines, those kind of things. That enables you to simplify your branching strategy. Okay. Again, not going deep into that. All right, so within GitHub, how do we manage code? So obviously, you have GitHub code, you have pull requests, document your dev workflow, use wikis. You should understand the GitHub code and pull requests, how to configure your GitHub settings. So go over to that settings tab and look through it. There are options there related to your branches, to your merge process, things like that. In addition, it's getting a little more advanced, but you should be aware at least that GitHub looks for some specially named files that it will use to incorporate into how GitHub behaves. So for example, simple example, if you put in the root of your code base a pull request template.md file, GitHub will say, oh, okay, that means every time someone creates a pull request, it's going to take that markdown file and put it into your pull request. You'll actually see what it looks like. There's code on there. Okay, I think I'm back on. Sorry, somehow lost some connectivity there, I guess. I'm not sure where I dropped, but I will finish this slide very quickly. Just again, look in your GitHub settings and look into the specially named files that will customize your workflow. Okay. All right, moving on. So let's look at some of those things in GitHub specifically. You can see everything is supported. So the repos, wikis, code reviews, and pull requests, those all work together. And then a look at GitHub repo. So here's code. And I would be stunned if anyone is not familiar with GitHub code. And then if we click into a file there, so actually this is an owner's file, and this is in Kubernetes again. You can actually even edit the file there, which is kind of scary. But again, just want to show you what it looks like in GitHub. And then here's pull requests. So there's the menu item at the top there. And Kubernetes has a queue of 864 pull requests as of that screenshot. Obviously, this is a massive open source project with a lot of different work streams going on. So hopefully you won't have that big of a backlog. And then here is an individual pull request. If you were to click through on one, and if you can see here in the details, there's a template there. So that's that pull request template. Okay. So again, you can use those special files. Okay, let's move into our next section focused on automating CI/CD pipelines. So what are our goals here? Regarding the whole shift left things, we want to find issues as soon as possible. So that could be quality issues, defects, security issues, performance issues. We should have a fast, automated path through all environments. So our CD pipelines should deploy to all environments. That's part of that continuous delivery theme. And in addition, ideally, you should be able to quickly stand up and deploy to net new environments, temporary environments, ephemeral. If you're on the cloud, this can be particularly easy, but we'll talk about why and how. So what could go wrong with our CI/CD pipelines? Well, we have here some bugs slipping through to production. We have the snail, which is signifying a slow CI or CD pipeline. For example, have you ever had a slow running CI pipeline such that when you push your code, you're stuck behind someone else whose code is currently going through the process? So that can be painful. Here's a security issue. I am stunned with how many of my clients commit secrets to their source code. Happens way too frequently. So we'll want to find those kind of issues and call them out and reject the code. Here is the ops team's manual typewriter that they use to do production deployments. Great. But they only deploy to stage and prod because the dev team is responsible for deploying to dev and test. Obviously, that doesn't work. And the good old manual file copies don't work. That's a terrible setup for failure, and lots of deploys have failed because of that. So of course we want to avoid all those things. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit specifically to continuous integration pipelines. So our CI pipeline should include testing, scanning, and building the artifacts that we will deploy later on. So with regard to testing, we should definitely do significant unit testing. That's quick, runs quick, so should keep our CI pipeline fast. And then some people do integration and testing and some load and performance testing in there. That gets a little dicey. I wouldn't necessarily suggest you do that. Obviously, with both integration tests and load and performance tests, that means you have to have environments set up and running to host those tests. If those environments aren't available or having issues, the test will fail, but it'd be a false fail. So I would suggest you probably do integration testing as a separate job, maybe once a day, once a week, something like that. And maybe your load and performance testing, daily, weekly, whatever makes sense for you. And then with regard to scanning, code quality scans, make sure your code's up to par, and metrics, and usually code quality and metrics are compiled by the same tools, and then security scans. And then with regard to artifacts, you can easily store your artifacts in GitHub packages, and some use third-party tooling like Artifactory is pretty common. Okay, and with regard to third-party options throughout here, so code quality and metrics, probably the most common one I see if you're not doing something like .NET coding, which has that stuff built in. SonarQube is probably the most commonly used in my experience. And then with regard to security, there's multiple tools like SonarQube, Veracode. Veracode's real popular with some really heavily secure companies, but it gets pretty expensive. Okay, and then looking ahead to CD pipelines. So here we have low-risk deployments. So I mentioned that briefly before. Again, these are the deployments that you can do in production while your users are active during the middle of the day and not worry that you're going to affect your users. The most common approach for doing this is blue-green deployments. That means you have your blue environment or your blue hosting and your green hosting. And for example, let's say you're doing a web app. So you'll have a load balancer in front of your environment. And let's say green is live right now. So your load balancer is pointed over to the green side. So while the green side is active, you can feel free to deploy your app over to the blue side. And then, run your automated testing. Some companies do some manual spot testing, that's fine too. But when you agree that all's good, ready to go on the blue side, then just reconfigure your load balancer and point it over to the newly deployed environment. Users should be completely unaware. Now, that's a simplistic example. There's other things related to this, like feature toggles, for example, and there's lots of detail. If you're interested, post in the chat that, if you'd like to go deeper into this huge topic, too big for discussing now in detail. But next up, being able to deploy to all environments, even temporary environments. So most of my clients do have CD pipelines going all the way through to production. That's fairly normal. However, temporary environments become interesting when you have a situation like, hey, we had a production defect that hit us today, and we need to hurry up and fix that, of course. So stop the presses, let's fix this bug, and now let's test it. Oh, here's the problem. Our QA team is currently working in our test environment, doing testing our next release, and we don't have another environment to deploy to. Well, let's run our infrastructure as code to stand up a new environment, and then let's run our pipeline to deploy, and we can do the infrastructure as code via a pipeline, and let's run our pipeline to deploy our apps and our data. So that could be database schemas, schema changes, adding data to the environment, whatever needs done to stand up a legit environment that then you can deploy your apps and data to and do your testing and get that bug deployed to production quick. Okay, so that happens pretty regularly at some places. And in particular, you can solve this whether you're deployed in the cloud or on-prem. It doesn't matter. It's easier in the cloud. But this is, as part of continuous improvement, if you have that issue, you should probably eventually make some effort and inroads into being able to deploy to temporary environments. Okay, and how will we achieve this? We'll be using GitHub Actions and third-party tools as needed. And so specifically, GitHub Actions. So that's how you do your CI/CD. Dependabot, that was an acquisition about a year ago. That scans for vulnerable dependencies. Then it'll let you know if you have a vulnerable dependency. So you can avoid an Equifax type issue from a few years back. Then there's GitHub Advanced Security. This is another acquisition a year ago of Semel, who built CodeQL, code query language. So security experts can write queries using CodeQL that will scan your code and identify vulnerable patterns. They'll identify code that looks like it could have open a security vulnerability and then let you know. And of course, third-party tools here as well. So probably the main third-party tool I've seen used in GitHub or within GitHub is probably some other security tools or things like Jenkins for clients of mine who have been using GitHub for ages, and they've been using Jenkins since before GitHub Actions came out. So all their pipelines are already in Jenkins. So that's pretty common. Okay, so there's GitHub Actions and GitHub Packages. You can see there is some variation across the SKUs in this case. And then there's Dependabot. There's both Dependabot Alerts, which is where it sends you an email letting you know you have an issue. And there's Dependabot Security Updates, which is where Dependabot actually will be proactive about it. It'll actually create a branch, update the code to the non-vulnerable version of that dependency, and then PR that change. Okay, and there's also that public secret scanning we talked about when developers commit secrets to code. Okay, so here's a screenshot of GitHub Actions. So that's just, if you navigate to GitHub Actions, you'll see the list of your workflows. So workflows are actually what get triggered and run your actions. And then here's a list of all the workflow runs. Now, if you were to go to the code and look for your workflows, so here's the code related to those. And if I click through to one of those, so again, GitHub Actions are all about workflows, triggers, and actions. The trigger triggers the workflow, and the workflow is composed of actions. So this is a workflow here at the top. It lists the trigger, the triggers that would fire off the workflow, and then below that, all the actions that should be executed during the workflow. Okay, and it's just YAML syntax to build those. And then for GitHub Packages, it's not in the main menu at the top. I actually had to go over to my my profile and go to my profile. Then it will list the packages. Kind of a weird navigation there. But there's a package, and if you click through the package, it'll show you, oh, you want to pull in that package, then here's the code to do that. Okay, here is a screenshot of a Dependabot alert. So this is where it emails you to let you know, what vulnerabilities there are in your dependencies. Okay, that's it for the CI/CD, optimizing CI/CD. And then finally, like I said, a real quick section on optimizing remote work. We're all working from home during this pandemic, and we're all attending tons of online meetings. And with these online meetings, just think about it from a continuous improvement mentality. You know, the issues to deal with, people talking over each other, or people having connection issues like I just did in this meeting. And should everybody display a live video or not? There's, just the point being, talk about it. So you have frequent meetings with your team, talk about those, whatever pain points come up, and agree to a common approach to solve them. Here's another one down here, the clocking in, clocking out. I read recently that on average, people are working 2 hours more in their workday these days. So maybe that's an issue, maybe it's not. But if it is, just block off that time on your calendar. Here's my favorite pair coding on things. If I need help, I want someone to look over my shoulder. I get some of the best, that's how I get through blockers quickly. So we don't have to solve everything on our own. We have this super genius little girl here who's helping this guy solve some code. So just be aware there, if a meeting's not enough, if you want to do some actual pair coding or whatever, there are solutions for that. Just search for it online. One I like a lot is Visual Studio Code's extension for pair coding. Works pretty darn well. And then obviously can be issues with connectivity, and if that affects you, it did at my last home. I had a terrible connection, had to fix that. But some people seem susceptible to it more than others. Okay, now looking forward, specifically with regard to GitHub and Microsoft. Let's start actually by looking back. So it was a couple of years back that Microsoft acquired GitHub. And then last year, I mentioned already, they acquired Dependabot and Semel. That's the GitHub Enterprise Security offering there, the CodeQL stuff. And late last year, Microsoft reorged the Azure DevOps teams. Actually, there's a reorg, but also co-located the Azure DevOps team with GitHub in the same building. And of course, all that changed with Corona when everyone had to go remote. Also in that time frame, huge growth in GitHub membership and repos. So the big question is, what's Microsoft going to do? Because Microsoft currently owns now 2 heavily used ALM tools. And as you can see here, the list of features, tons of feature overlap. Of course, they're both trying to solve the same problems. So first off, GitHub is going to be the go-forward answer. That's going to be the go-forward ALM tool. We'll get the majority of the enhancements and all that. Azure DevOps isn't going away, however. Microsoft is still enhancing it. And if it's follows the typical life cycle of a Microsoft product, it's going to be around for another 10, 12 years. But still, we got to get all these features over into GitHub if it's going to be the end solution. So we're going to take the things that don't exist in Azure DevOps and then move them over to GitHub at some point. When? We'll talk about that. And then there's also each of these different places where there's duplicate features between Azure DevOps and GitHub. Well, what if there's a nitty-gritty feature over on the Azure DevOps side that isn't part of GitHub yet? So we got to move those over too. Okay, so we kind of want GitHub to become something of the superset of features between Azure DevOps and GitHub. So that's kind of the goal. When is a big question, but here's the roadmap. So if you aren't familiar yet, there's the URL down at the bottom. You can actually go and look up, here's July through September. So by quarter, they're showing you what their plans are for deploying features into GitHub. So there's literally the roadmap, the feature plans for GitHub. So have a look at that. If you are currently using Azure DevOps, you might want to start thinking about, look, I know the future is going to be GitHub, so what should I do? You could immediately move your repos from Azure DevOps over into GitHub because Azure DevOps already has fantastic integration with GitHub repos. That's already in place. So that's easy, low-hanging fruit. Things get harder when you start talking about things like Azure pipelines and Azure boards. Probably should keep using Azure boards if you do currently. And you can explore what it would take to move over to GitHub Actions, but you'd have to look at your current pipelines, look at the features you're using, and see if those are all available in GitHub Actions. So you'd have some work to do to figure that out. Or you could wait, because again, Azure DevOps isn't going anywhere, and you could wait until you find that GitHub Actions wait till they get all those features moved over into GitHub. And finally, if you are looking to ramp up or learn about GitHub, here you go. Learning Lab. There's the URL. These are hands-on labs, live, lots of topics. Dive in and have a look and learn. This is a great platform, easy way to ramp up. Okay, and that's all I have for you today. So I hope that was useful for you. If you have any additional questions, please let us know now. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Olivia to close out.
Thanks, Vince. That concludes today's webinar. If you haven't done so already, please take a moment to complete our survey. A big thank you to the presentation team today and to the attendees. Thank you for the time and opportunity to come together. With that, we'll turn you back to your day. Thank you.
Thanks, all.